because I think in a post-pandemic world, you see a lot of people that are trying different things, that have seen different versions of themselves, that are realizing that their mortality is real, and that
Mhm.
we have to, as Einstein once quoted, as was once quoted as saying, that if we want to make our life a masterpiece, we have to color outside the lines. And you think about someone like Einstein creating like the theory of relativity and E equals MC squared. And he even talked about the importance of coloring outside the lines,
Mhm.
right? And so in terms of creative thought, and so whatever that looks like for you, I want to use that creativity, that boldness, that lack of and not having imposter syndrome to go after whatever you want, because I believe that we are here not for a very long time, right? So we should have a good time. And that's where coloring outside the lines and the genesis of that came from.
This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Sivarajan, and welcome to the Future Ready Advisor. Today, I'm joined by Will Baggett, author of Hues of Hope, A Colorful Journey Outside the Lines. Will is a dynamic speaker and thought leader who uses creativity to inspire resilience, optimism, and personal transformation. His unique framework challenges conventional thinking, helping individuals and teams embrace imperfection and unlock their full potential. Join me for an engaging conversation packed with actionable insights. Will, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Sam. You got to send that to me, man. I need that for my stage intros, man. That was
I will
awesome, man.
do.
But
I will
yeah,
do.
but I'm super excited to be on your platform, man. I followed it for a very long time now, and it's an honor and a blessing to be here.
Well, I'm grateful for you to be there, and I think that the audience is going to truly resonate with the message that I think you then generally give. So let me start by saying, for the audience's benefit, that your journey spans roles as an author, as a keynote speaker, and as an advocate for creativity, using it as a tool for resilience. Can you share, for the audience's benefit, a bit about your background, what sparked your passion for these themes, and how they've shaped your work and key focus areas?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I'll make a short story long. No, I'm joking. Quite honestly, man, I'm born and raised. I'm a born and raised true Southerner from North Mississippi. Very proud of that. I will say, man, first and foremost, I had really great parents. I had great parents that did not put limits or bounds on me, honestly. They really allowed me to explore, to learn, to make my own mistakes. And I think that's what inspired a lot of creativity, right? They never told me what I couldn't do or what wasn't possible. And I think I've carried that into my adult life. And so I've been really appreciative of that as I've grown older. And so as far as my actual professional and background, Ole Miss graduate, Baylor grad school, and I also spent about 10 years in sports and entertainment. And so I worked at places in the States, such as the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, IMG, the college football playoff, Super Bowl, Final Four, anything with the ball or an event. I probably have seen it, done it, and have a T-shirt at this point, right? So I really enjoyed my sports and entertainment career, and I can still volunteer actively. I was a former strength and conditioning coach somewhere in all of that, where I work with collegiate athletes in building their, physical strength, and I think also as a byproduct their confidence as well. So enjoy doing that. And I actually started my keynote speaking journey back in 2017. I wrote my very first book a few months before that, entitled The Blueprint for a Successful Career. And so when I came into the game or the industry, so to speak, my original message was about executive presence and executive image. That was pretty much the name of my business. That's what I became known for. And I mostly worked with collegiate and professional athletic teams in terms of teaching them about being professional, how to speak without speaking, through how they present themselves, through body language, the power of connection. And I still incorporate some of those elements into my keynotes today. But I also, like you said, have moved over to a more creative aspect, right? A less structured aspect, because I think in a post-pandemic world, you see a lot of people that are trying different things, that have seen different versions of themselves, that are realizing that their mortality is real, and that
Mhm.
we have to, as Einstein once quoted, as was once quoted as saying, that if we want to make our life a masterpiece, we have to color outside the lines. And you think about someone like Einstein creating like the theory of relativity and E equals MC squared. And he even talked about the importance of coloring outside the lines,
Mhm.
right? And so, in terms of creative thought, and so whatever it looks like for you, I want to use that creativity, that boldness, and not having imposter syndrome to go after whatever you want, because I believe that we are here not for a very long time, right? So we should have a good time. And that's where coloring outside the lines and the genesis of that came from.
That's such an important message. And I think you said something that really kind of resonated with me. And that is that post pandemic, that there's a lot of differences that we've sort of understood. It was always in the background, but it's now become front and center. To me, I see this concept of uncertainty. Nobody really predicted the pandemic. Nobody predicted how we would adapt to it, how we would move on from it, and what a post pandemic world would look like. And I see a lot of what you're talking about, that creativity of living the life that we're meant to lead, as encouraging this idea, thinking outside of the box or coloring outside of the lines, of being resilient and optimistic, and saying that you don't need to have the answers, but you can figure it out. How do you see this kind of mindset benefiting individuals in this type of world where nothing seems to be certain anymore?
Absolutely, yeah. There was a time when we were all kind of opening our emails, our email greetings with, "I hope you're doing well these unprecedented times." Well, now every day is an unprecedented
Yeah.
time, right? The old saying goes that the only constant is change, and now more than ever, that is true, because it used to be maybe things would change 1 to 2, 3 years. Now things are changing every 1 to 3 days.
Mhm.
Honestly, right? I mean, there's a platform called there's an AI for that has over 13,000 AI features and applications that a person can choose from to do nearly anything.
Mhm.
And so I think in this world that we're living in, if you even look at some of the predictions from the LinkedIn CEO, who was actually right on some former predictions, he talks about the standard 9 to 5 job being extinct by 2034. Right. And I think more and more, and I think in other countries, I forget which one it was, but they're already beginning to experiment with a 4-day work week because of low birth rates.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm seeing all these different things where people are realizing they're having to loosen the reins a little bit, because people are not necessarily wanting work-life balance as much as work-life integration, right? They don't want to like live to work, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
And now there's so many different ways for people to earn an income. And so many people have side hustles now, to where
Mhm.
in some cases moonlighting is still frowned upon in some places, but in some places they're like, hey, we get it, right? We understand. And so I think embracing that is inevitable if you want to stay competitive for top talent, because people are realizing they have options and they have leverage. And so when you realize you have leverage and you have a collective movement towards that understands that, that in a way forces the hand of the establishment.
Mhm.
And that's why I think you're kind of starting to see a seismic shift and change, because Gen Z is not coming, they're here. And I think right now you have, give or take, you almost have about 4 generations in the workforce, like very much on the edge, right? And on the higher range. And there's a lot of volatility, right? Within that, a lot of different mindsets in terms of what the value based rewards may be. A different generation may have said, hey, I want to get my pension 401k and get my corner office or my corner cubicle, and I'm good. And the new age workers may say like, hey, I want to work for a company that has a cause,
Mhm.
that's making a difference. I do want to make a good income. I want to have more flexibility, right? And so it's one thing if one person says it, when you got a whole generation that's saying it, and you have now millennials moving into decision making roles as well, and what I call the bridge generation that saw pre-internet, pre-social media, and also post.
Mhm.
Things are changing constantly, and that's why I think the need for creativity and creative leadership is more important than ever.
I think you're absolutely right. We've seen how quickly we shifted to a digital world or a work from home world. I think that pre pandemic, there was always this talk about that we were going to get there, and it was like 3, 4, 5 years away. And when push came to shove, we had to do it in 5 weeks, right? And we figured out a way to do it. So I think we're seeing these kind of tectonic forces that are moving, that are forcing us to rethink. And so you're right. We need to think about it. We need to be prepared for it. And part of it is being less rigid and open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And you kind of pass that message to your audiences when you speak in front of companies and corporations. To some extent, financial advisors are in the same boat as you. Like they're dealing with on a one-on-one or a few on one kind of scenario where they're dealing with clients, and this idea of thinking differently or less rigidly, I think applies to the financial advising space and clients as well, to think differently about their financial goals and their challenges. What advice or view would you have to financial advisors that are listening to this episode about applying this idea of creativity or coloring outside of the lines to help their clients achieve their financial objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this as a person that is not licensed in the financial space. I would say this just kind of from a starting point is first and foremost your connection with your prospective clients or your current clients, right? Because I always say that the shortest distance between two people is connection. And so the days of sending the LinkedIn message templates with no personalization, no connection, those days are quickly coming to an end, right? People are becoming inundated with those things, and they want real people. They want people that are going to cut to the chase, be real about what they're looking for, what they're seeking, and also that it may be taking some time to learn about them, right? And not just send them some stock message and just into the abyss and just hope for the best. And so I think first and foremost is how are you connecting and attracting your clients? And I say this from a different side of the tracks as a licensed real estate agent. Once you obtain a certification or a license such as real estate, and I speak uneducated about the financial advising world, once you get to that point, if you have your and certifications, the licenses are in good standing, there's not much difference or variation in what we can do from a practical standpoint. Just an application, can we do this? Your fiduciary duty, blah, 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 what have you. So what becomes the difference maker? The how you do it, the connection, right? The creativity, your communication, how you make them feel, how on the cutting edge you are of what's coming down the pike. That's what's going to create some difference because of the day, it's why would I choose you? The same thing goes for me as a keynote speaker. Anybody on the planet that has the ability to talk is technically my competition, and there's no barrier to entry. It's a First Amendment right in the States, right? So I look at that as saying, okay, for me to create top of mind awareness and differentiation, I have to do what a lot of people have the ability to do at a really, 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 really high level, right? To create that level of separation. And so I think the same thing goes for financial advisors and understanding, hey, there were the traditional ways that I think are tried and true. You think about on the accounting side, generally accepted accounting principles. There are generally accepted, I would imagine, financial principles that are tried and true. You get your 401k, you get your Roth, you figure these different things out. But now people are going to have questions about blockchain and crypto and coins and things like that. They're going to have questions, and it may be still very risky and volatile, right? And it may not be what they recommend, but the ability to speak about it in an educated form to say, hey, you know what? I may not recommend this, but here's why. Not because it's new, not because it's not the traditional way we used to do it. It's because I've done my research and here's why I say yay or nay. Right. I think because now people are getting so much information so quickly at their fingertips that sometimes the information they have can be mistaken for knowledge. And I believe information is something you may get in 30 to 60 seconds on an Instagram or TikTok video, but that doesn't indicate knowledge. Right.
100%.
Some younger folks, they may say, okay, TikTok told me all I have to do is go open an LLC and I can go buy a G-Wagon. It's not that simple.
No.
And so having people that can come in like yourself and your colleagues with an understanding of what they are seeing, what they are engaging in, what they're listening into, and being able to balance that with sound, tried and true financial principles and counsel, I think that's going to be the difference maker, aside from the ability to attract and retain clients with great connection and realness and authenticity.
That's a great point, and I think you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion, that there's a difference between information and I would say application. And the example that I've used in the past is that, look, I can go look up on the internet and look up what I have a stomach ache and what that means, and there's information that says there that, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this other thing, right? It could be something very serious that you need hospital for. A doctor, when you go to them, they're providing you application of that information. They're able to look at it, look at all of the other factors, your history, knowledge of you, and then be able to sit there and say, based on everything that I know, I'm taking this information that's out there and I'm bringing it down to this application to say, in your case, we can rule out all of these things, take an antacid, go to bed, and tomorrow you'll be okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And look, not for everyone, but for most people, I think there's a value in that to be able to provide that specific application of knowledge. Because to your point, the internet is full of information and you can find 10 different opinions on any particular topic. How is somebody supposed to sift through all of that and come up with the right answer that is, giving them peace of mind? That's where a financial advisor or any professional, that's the value that they add. And I think ultimately the way you differentiate yourself, to your point, to your clients or to your market, is to show that you can apply the same information in a better, easier, more personal way than they might get otherwise.
Absolutely. You nailed it. Absolutely. Absolutely, sir.
Now, this is something that I think to me is near and dear to my heart because it is something that we as a society aren't comfortable with. And I think particularly in the industry of financial advice, we're not comfortable with because, again, we're regulated, there's rules, there's liability. But one of the core themes in your book is this idea of embracing imperfection, that we're all imperfect and we're all a work in progress. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very valuable mindset to have, particularly in our current world. How do people, particularly advisors, apply this mindset? Do you see in practice to guide clients through the fear of making mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I actually made a note right before we got on the podcast that perfect isn't real and real isn't perfect. And there's actual psychological research to back that up. There is a study that they did, or a concept called the pratfall effect, aka the blemish effect, that basically says what doesn't appear perfect is more relatable and more widely accepted by the average person than what seems to be prim and perfect. The reason is they did a study where for instance, they did give an example where, let's say there were two books on Amazon you're considering reading, and let's say it's very popular books, right? And let's say both books each had 1,000 reviews. Book number one had 1,000 reviews and they have a 5-star rating across the board. It's perfect, right? Book number two has a 4.8 star rating, right? Still very high, but there's some realness in there because nothing is perfect, right? Now, it could be in the eye of the beholder. In fairness, I'm not saying that the 5-star book isn't amazing, but just by nature of people and how they live and just the mistakes we make every single day, we know that it's just nothing is absolutely perfect, right? It may be perfect for a person in a given instance or season. And so the blemish effect basically says that things that are not perfect appear more real, more relatable, and are more widely accepted. So there's research in psychology and studies to back this up, right? There are actually some company, I think Coca-Cola did this one time. They purposely put a misspelling in one of their marketing emails just to gain more publicity,
Well,
right? Right now, you have the grammar police that are going to come in like, you did this and this, and you did this and this and that. But it got shared so much.
I was going to say, they're
right?
talking about it at least. then,
Right. Now they're talking about it because we're not selling dictionaries, we're selling Cokes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so depending on your industry and what you're trying to drum up interest about, right? Any publicity can be good publicity depending on what you're selling. In that case, we just trying to sell Coke. We don't care anything about dictionaries and grammar, right? So there have been examples of people playing on this blemish effect to create a level of connection with other people. And so I think the same thing goes, for us, and everyone is falling short. Everyone's made a mistake and may make a mistake, make a mistake daily. And I think that there's so many people are scared to start or scared to try anything because they think they'll be judged by people who haven't started or tried anything. It's like a paradox. It's very weird. And so for me, the way I was able to kind of get outside the lines personally is that I became very sick in 2020. All right. This is my kind of vulnerability connecting because everybody's been sick. Maybe not as sick as I was, but I got pretty sick in 2020. And I realized that there were only a few people around me that I felt comfortable with in my vulnerable state. And I said, why am I worrying about the masses if at my lowest point, these are the only people that are around me that are supporting me day in and day out. And it's not to say that, we shouldn't still like, of course, have, great networks of people. But when things are not going well, the people you're comfortable with sharing that with is going to be a really, really, really small group of people, right? And so I said, you know what? I'm going to begin to live my life the way I want to live it, right? Because no one's paying any bills over here with me. I'll have to give an account for what I did, right? When I'm no longer here. And I think that is something that everyone should embody and appreciate, right? Because, everyone maybe lost a little bit of money before. And so I think someone can come out and say, hey, I made a mistake. I may be wrong. I may have done the wrong thing. That creates a level of trust and vulnerability because vulnerability, in my opinion, is actually strength. It comes across as weakness, but if a grown person can look you in the eye and say, I didn't do the right thing, or I made a
Right.
mistake, or I fell short, that's a strong, strong person that's done a lot of introspection, a lot of inner work to be able to speak with that level of strength and not fear the blowback or what may come from that, or the judgment that could come from it, or the loss of the client, right? And they say, you know what? Hey, that wasn't my person. I did my best, foot forward. I was honest. I was authentic. You can't win them all. And so that's what I would submit to people is because you think about it when you think about the financial advisory world, right? And in any kind of space, I'll give a different example. Let's say you're thinking about McDonald's, right? McDonald's may not have the best customer service reputation. They probably don't have the best reputation for customer service. So the bar is set kind of low, right? But let's say you walk into a McDonald's, you go through a drive-through, and you get extraordinary service, right? That's going to send the impression of that super high because the bar was kind of low, right? It's such an aberration from the norm what you expect. The same thing may go, okay, well, maybe financial advisors don't have personality. Maybe they aren't fun. Let's say a financial advisor comes in, cracks a joke, or says something that is, culturally relevant, that's not cheesy, that's authentic to them, right? And mixes up a little bit instead of, the same old jargon. That's going to give a whole different impression,
Right.
right? From a perception standpoint. And again, we have to understand what the perceptions may be, right? There are some perceptions that may be around speakers, right? Same old jokes, same old story, same this and that, right? And so I have to make sure I'm combating that with personality and charisma. And so I would say, no matter what industry a person is in, right, there may be some drawbacks and some downfalls. And so what I try to do is focus on what those kind of wide perceptions may be, even if they're incorrect. And I try to work against them because the best marketing is having a solution to your customers' problems before they even ask it, right? That's the best marketing you can do. You can already address their question or address their potential issue before they even have a chance to voice it. And so that's what I would submit to people in terms of think about your industry. What's the perception? How can I just mix it up just a little bit, right? How can I mix it up just a tad bit and I just watch your reception, how receptive people are to say, you know what? I didn't know that this was possible. I didn't know, I never met anyone like you. I never seen anyone that was willing to send an email like this or a subject line like that or name a keynote like this or pass out fries with a smile like this, right? Never seen that before. And that's going to create a lasting impression that will be rivaled by very, very little.
That's such a powerful message, Will. There's so much packed in there. So, first of all, thank you for sharing your personal story. And I love your characterization of vulnerability being actually a superpower. And I think it's true. And I think, particularly in a situation that a financial advisor finds themselves in, they are the expert that the client is coming towards. And there's almost this teacher student kind of feeling to it. And most clients don't like it because they are experts in their own right, in their own field, in their own lives. So to be kind of being in a put or feeling like they're in a position where there's being taught by an expert, I think is not a fun feeling. So to the extent that the And again, the question is the advisor's objective to be seen as an expert or to be seen as a solution to a problem that I have and to be a trusted partner to the client? I would submit that it's the second, not the first. In order to be that second, then you have to kind of show a degree of vulnerability, the degree of connection, the degree of meeting the client where the client is and not having them meet you where you are. So I love all of that characterization, and I think you're absolutely right that understanding what the perceptions are of the industry, understanding the client and their particular challenges or their perceptions and how you might counter them, I think is critical. And to add on to the one point that you made, your own personal experience that there's only so many people that are actually paying attention to you. It's a very hard thing for people to get out of their own head, but there's enough research that says that, most of the things that we think that people are paying attention to what we say, how we dress, how we move. And the reality is that 95% of people are not thinking at all about that, right? That they're
Correct.
focused on their own thing. I mean, just imagine yourself. There's a really, really great exercise. This is written by a guy. The author, his name is Oliver Berkman. He's written a book and he's talked about an exercise that a psychologist had him do. And so he's on the subway in London. Okay. And the psychologist had him run this experiment where, like, as they're coming up to a station, okay, and you hear over the intercom the announcement of the station that they're coming. So he made this guy, this author, say out loud every station that they're coming to so that everybody in the car could hear him say this, right?
Yeah.
And so the first station that he's doing this for, he's
Mhm.
so in his head. He's sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to look like there's something wrong with me. And so he says it the first time, and one or two people look at him, but most people aren't paying attention. The next station, he does it and it becomes easier. And by the third or fourth or fifth station, he just realizes that, like, nobody's really paying attention to him or judging him or thinking anything about it, right?
You're absolutely right. It's called, and there may be different names for it. The name I'm familiar with for that particular phenomenon is called the spotlight effect in
Okay.
psychology. Yeah, and that's and you already defined it, so I won't go back into it, but it's exactly right. I mean, people, depending on what you read, between 6,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day, depending on what you read, half of a half of a half of one may be dedicated to you, right? Half of a half of a half of a one, right? If even that. And because people have so much going through their minds, they have their own, challenges, their own things they're dealing with. They don't have time to be just focused on another person because it's not going to get them anywhere. And quite frankly, this is a very unpopular opinion, but that's what I do. I color outside the lines, right? I personally think that I talk to at least two people a week that are dealing with imposter syndrome. At least two a week minimum. I think that, and again, it's unpopular. If you lose some subscribers, I'm sorry, I'll pay you back. I think that it can be grounded, imposter syndrome can be grounded in conceitedness and selfishness. I really do. Let me tell you why. Because when you have something to give as a speaker, as a financial advisor, as a confidant, as a friend, as a barber, as a service member, whatever it is, you got something to give. The unwillingness to give that because of what you think someone will think of you when you have something to share, I think is very selfish, personally. And then also pursuant to the spotlight effect, and then knowing what we just talked about, if you're constantly thinking people are thinking about you all day long, I think that's a little bit of self-absorption, right? That we need to kind of work on a little bit. And it could be a little bit lack of confidence as well. I see that. I see that as well. But I think that an over fixation of thinking that people are thinking about you, what you're doing at all times, I think that could be grounded in a very, very like weird way and not a malicious way, and conceitedness and maybe arrogance, right? And so I think people that have something to share, I think it's incumbent of you, it's your responsibility to give that. I talked to somebody about that one time. It's like, well, I want to do this and this and that, and but I don't want to do this and that. I'm like, do you have something to share? Is it going to help somebody? It's like, yeah. Well, why don't you do it? Well, what are they going to think about me? So, is it about you, or is it about your audience? It's like it's about me. I said, okay. So now
Well,
we're getting some.
I think it's a very, very powerful observation, Will. I think, look, we live in a society where we've been colored to think about And it's not a bad thing to think about how we're placed in society and what others think of us. But I think we've also almost inadvertently come to the view that everything that we do, everybody has to like. Okay. And I think that there's not, and I'm making it up, but you take any beloved celebrity or like the Pope, for instance, and not everybody loves everything that the Pope does either. And I'm pretty sure the Pope's not losing a lot of sleep worrying about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think to your point, if your avocation or occupation is to add value to your clients' financial lives as a financial advisor, you need to accept that not every client you're going to be able to help, or not every client is going to be helped, right? Like this from your athletic days, and we used to say this managing teams. Every team member needs to have a good coach, but it's a two-way street. The player or the team member needs to be coachable, right?
That's right.
And so the greatest coach in the world can't do anything with an athlete who's not coachable. That doesn't mean that the coach doesn't have value to add or should not be being a coach. It just means this person they can't help, and you become okay with that, right?
Yeah, we're at an impasse at this point, and we agree to disagree and go different separate ways. And you brought up something else I thought was very compelling, in that by the third time the guy didn't care what people are thinking about him. I think that you bring up a point. I don't know if this has actually been researched and it's an actual like real term, but rejection immunity. When you just get immune to rejection, like, what? Hey, missed a couple times. Now it's like, okay, I don't care. A couple messages didn't get responded to. Okay, missed a couple, pitches here and proposals. Okay. You know what I mean? You on to the next. You know what I
No,
mean?
but
And
I think I think it is a term, and I think it's bang on. I think the rejection immunity, like I think most financial advisors would have started by doing cold calls. It's not a fun or a glamorous way of starting your career, etc. But it's important because it makes you comfortable with being rejected. You realize that this is a numbers game, right? And bringing an athletic metaphor in place, like the best baseball players in the world bat
300,
350,
300, 350.
300,
Yep.
350.
350.
That
The
means that they're
best.
missing 6 times out of 10, etc.
That's correct.
So it's a
That is
numbers
correct.
game, right? And again, like I'm mixing metaphors. It was Michael Jordan, that said you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. All right.
Right.
Once you accept the fact and get comfortable and immune to
Mhm.
rejection, I think that the world is your oyster. It opens it up right at that
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah. I totally agree. That was a great movie here in the States. You've seen it or not, with Eminem, a famous rapper, called 8 Mile. And at the end of the movie, he'd had a tough life. He had a tough go in the movie. And at the end, he knew all of his flaws and basically talked about himself in his rap, in his cipher, to the point where his opponent just backed out of the battle because he had nothing to say. Like, this guy knew every flaw he had, every mishap, everything that happened to him, and he was open and vulnerable about it in front of everybody, to the point it basically make the guy just choke up and say, "Hey, I got nothing to say." And so I think when you do the inner work and you're self aware, you know where you fall short, you know your weaknesses, you don't allow people to put you in a prison of their own paradigms,
I
right?
like that.
You don't allow that, right? You're just like, hey, I know that I got some things here. That's okay, but you do too. These may look different from mine, right? But I'm doing my best, and no one's gonna make me feel bad for doing my best and or not being able to change some things I cannot control, right? If I'm working towards, I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to treat people the right way. And that's what I think about when it comes to even just people that have different belief systems. Listen, most belief systems revolve around working hard, treating people the right way, and being a good person. Can we agree on that? I think we can move forward. And that's why I look at it like, can we agree on that part? Can we agree on that? If the answer is yes, we can keep pushing forward. Not to change the subject, but I'm just trying to, again, my message is all about the creativity and connection. So let's just boil these things down, all these very complex systems and things we created in our today's society for division, boil them down to the simplest form, and they're not that different.
No, it's a much needed message today, but I 100% share it. I think that we're so busy and we're allowing people to kind of look at the little minute differences, that you like wearing this designer and I like wearing this designer. When it comes down to the core things, most people are not that fundamentally different, right? And I think to your point, if you go down to foundational levels and do the work and say, on these core values, can we agree? I actually think that you can find that most people will agree on most things, right? It's just, excuse me, I think it's really like the divisions are to some extent manufactured than anything else. Again, the inner work is important to understand yourself, but I think it's also, especially if you're a financial advisor, et cetera, part of your role, I think, is to see where you can bridge that connection with that client of yours. There are people like that, now we're talking about different sets of values, but there are people that if you are somebody, and I'm making this up, as a financial advisor that absolutely thinks that crypto is danger or kryptonite or what have you, and you have a client that says, I want all of my assets in crypto, I think there's a question whether you should be working together or not, right? But beyond that, I think you're trying to find ways that you can bridge what is the common ground that you have to work with. Which segues very, very nicely to the next question I had for you, which is you've been sharing your insights with audiences around the world. What have you learned from these experiences about how to connect with different groups and diverse groups? So you have an audience with different personalities, different people, and you're trying to engage with all of them with the common message. What lessons do you think the financial advisors you can impart to them that they may be able to use to be able to engage better with their clients?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to a few core foundational things that we've kind of mentioned here in the last few moments. But you have to think about foundationally and holistically, what do most people care about? Most people care about their family, their time, and their money. I would argue that those things may be in a different order, and you may add in different spiritual beliefs and things of that sort, and friends, things like that. But I would argue that their family, their time, and their money would be in the top 5 to top 10 of most
For everybody.
people's, right, for everybody. I would argue that, right? And so knowing that, you have to understand that outside of that, people are very complex, right? People are very complex beings of what we're made of to how we think. No one sees life the same way that you see it, through the same lens, the same lived experiences. And so I think there has to be room left for that, right? That volatility and those oscillations, right? And differences in perspective. But the great thing is you can stay open to it, right? You can stay open to be able to hear something different, someone that came from a different part of the world or thinks differently. And that's why I was so appreciative to be able to go to Colombia, Medellin, Colombia in the last couple of weeks, because I realized like, man, I am miles and miles away from home. These people don't live really anything like me, yet they're surviving and thriving. They're happy. And it just makes you realize there's so many different ways to do this. And so I think at the end of the day, they cared about their family, their time, and their money. And so I think it kind of goes back to the how to win friends and influence people principle
Mhm.
of when you can speak in terms of other people's interests, right? And knowing what those big broad umbrellas are, but then you can kind of use that to get to the core, like, okay, tell me about your family, right? Right? Tell me about your relationship with money. Was money a traumatic experience for you growing up, right? Because I think sometimes people think that money's going to fix all their problems, right? Money only fixes money problems, right? It can buy you convenience. It can buy you, in some cases, freedom. It can buy you resources, but it's not going to repair a relationship with a family member,
Mhm.
right? If you won't pick up the phone, right? And so I think it's the ability to understand the broad-based principles and take those things to create a connection of understanding and say, hey, let me learn more about you so I can tailor what I would recommend to how aggressive or how moderate you want to be or lack thereof, depending on your history and your relationship with money, right? Because people are growing in their relationship with money. If you experience money trauma and now you come into a lot of resources, well, it's kind of like, when I first started making an income to where I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, I was still going to the grocery store and only shopping for the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
My mindset had not shifted
Mhm.
to my new income level, right? And not to say that lifestyle creep should come in and that brings you back to zero or whatever it is. But my mindset was, you know what? I can shop for the month now. I can shop for 2 months now. But my mindset and my kind of money relationship was conditioned to think I can only shop until my next paycheck.
Well, it takes
So I,
time to catch up, right?
yeah, it takes time to catch up. The mindset had to take time to catch up, to take that kind of mental cap off, so to speak. And so I think that despite what a person may have, and you may see their resources on paper when you're prospecting, you don't know what their relationship with money is just because they earn a lot of it.
Mhm.
And so being able to boil it down to, time, your money and their family, and really focusing on those core things and be able to unpack those person to person, it takes more time. It's not the most efficient. It's not the most economical, but it's going to make a difference, and it's going to create a connection that's more long lasting, right? Even if they hit a rough spot or rough patch, they'll come back to you because they remembered how you treated them. Hey, I need to make they can pull something out of here, this and that, but I'll get it back and I'll come back to you, right? And so I think you want to create that connection to where even if something changes, they want to come back to you. You have that top of mind awareness. And the last thing I'll say to that end, just from my own personal relationship, like my virtual assistant who lives in the Philippines, he's been with me for about a year. And on his year anniversary, because of our connection, how much research he did on me in our interview, what he does to make sure we stay connected, what he knows about my family, the extra steps he takes, I decided to give him a lifetime contract and told him he's hired for life, right? Because of all the soft skills and all of the small things he did on that were not a part of his job description. When we interviewed, he had went through and read the last year's worth of all of my posts on LinkedIn, the last year's worth. You can't coach that. You can't teach that. And that's what made him earn a lifetime contract. So I would say that same could apply to financial advisors if they apply that in their own way.
I think that's such a great example, Will. I think, look, at the end of the day, before anything matters, whether that's your virtual assistant or a financial advisor to a client, it all starts by showing that you care, demonstrating that you care. There's one thing to say, I care, and there's another thing to have your actions prove that you care, right? Once you prove that you care, I always used to say that an advisor to be successful, they have to show the client that they care about the client's money almost as much as they care about their own.
Right.
And when you can do that, then it's a whole different ballgame, right? Well, if there's one lasting message you want readers and advisors to take away from your latest book, Hues of Hope, what would it be? And why do you think that's especially relevant in today's world?
Yeah, I would say one of my key takeaways would be the best version of yourself and not a secondhand version of someone else. Right. I think because of the visibility we have into everybody else's lives, I think there are some benefits, right, in terms of exposure and different ways of doing things and creativity that can be generated from that exposure. But I also think that if you look at now, just based on the research, people are spending a lot more time alone now.
Mhm.
People, the happiness index has gone down in a lot of cases just because people are not connecting and they're spending a lot more time comparing, right? Whereas
That's
back
good.
in yesteryears, I mean, you didn't know what the Joneses had. You may look across the street, but you didn't really know what was going on, for real. And so I think that gave people an opportunity to kind of run their own race without the kind of benefit or drawback of knowing what was going on, across the world or across the street. And so I would say the ability to unplug and do nothing has changed my life because you get your best ideas when you're doing nothing. That's what research shows. And I know you're going on your retreat here soon. So I'm excited for the insights and the ideas that you're going to gain from essentially, and I'm not saying doing nothing because I know meditation is important and it takes work to do to clear your mind. So I don't want to denigrate or diminish that importance, but being able to clear your mind and being able to not feel like you have to be constantly in motion or constantly doing something was something I had an issue with, in years past. And so once I got past that and I was able to just really just unplug, get away, that enabled me to be the best version of myself instead of trying to mimic and copy to be the secondhand version of someone else. Right. And so there's a quote, I forgot who said it, that says, no one has your fingerprint, so no one has your imprint on the
Oh,
world
I
or
like
on
that.
life. And so that's what I've chosen to pursue and do, and the way I've chosen to kind of live my life. So be the best version of yourself, not a secondhand version of someone else.
I love that. And it's highly relevant today because we live in a hyper connected world. It's noisy. And for me, I think that I find what was easy to kind of unplug and be with myself and figure out things, it becomes harder and harder to do, right? Well, we're coming on to the end of our podcast. So I have a few final rapid fire questions for you that I ask all my guests. So if you're ready,
Let's do it.
Number one, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always.
So true, especially in this day of troll wars and stuff on the internet. I think you're 100% right. Number two, what is one practical tip you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights?
Learn to slow down and take baths. I take a sit-down bath, 3 to 4 times a week. I call it submerged and immersed because I can submerge myself in water. We're made up of mostly water. The earth is mostly water. And I can immerse myself in a book or something that is different from just scrolling on my cell phone. So I would say submerge and immerse yourself in something different.
Awesome. Will, this has been a fun conversation, an insightful conversation. So thank you. If listeners want to learn more about you or find your work, where do they go?
Absolutely. I'm the easiest person to find. You can find me on social media as Will Baggett, LinkedIn, anywhere you have social media. My website is willbaggett.com, 2 G's, 2 T's. I would love to connect with you all. And I want to thank you, Sam, for creating a platform for me to share and others to share, because I think it's one of the greatest skills and greatest form of selflessness to be able to listen to people talk and give their stories for extended amount of time, because so many people will listen to respond and not listen to listen. And so your ability to do that, create a safe space for sharing and connectivity, I think is absolutely masterful. And I'm appreciative to have been on your platform.
Well, I'm grateful for you to join me today on the Future Ready Advisor, Will. This has been a lot of fun, and I know the audience will get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
In this episode, I spoke with Will Baggett, keynote speaker and the author of the book Hues of Hope, A Colorful Journey Outside the Lines. Here are my 3 key takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, creativity is a leadership imperative. Will argues that in a world of constant disruption, advisors must evolve beyond rigid playbooks. Creative thinking, what he calls coloring outside the lines, isn't just for artists. It's a vital tool for connecting with clients, solving complex problems, and standing out in a crowded marketplace. Number 2, connection trumps perfection. In a profession where trust is paramount, Will reminds us that vulnerability and authenticity go further than polished perfection. Clients don't need superheroes, they need real partners. Embracing imperfection builds rapport, fosters trust, and humanizes the advisor-client relationship. Number 3, understanding beats information. With clients bombarded by online financial tips and TikTok gurus, Will highlights the advisor's edge, applying wisdom, not just facts. Differentiation comes from understanding your client's values, history, and money mindset, and tailoring advice that feels personal, relevant, and grounded. Will's message is clear. In today's advisory world, creativity, connection, and client-centered communication are the new power skills. Thank you for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor podcast. You've been listening to the Future Ready Advisor. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, or share your feedback wherever you listen. Be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. For more insights on how to keep your practice future ready, visit www.samsivarajan.com. You can find the link on the show notes. There you'll find free tools and resources, along with exclusive bonus content from these podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more strategies with you in the next episode.